Some houseplants are ugly.
What happened to hello? How are you? My name is. What happened to that?
Yes, if nobody's gonna say it, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it, and we're not gonna even be wasting our time with introductions today. We're going straight to the nitty-gritty. No explanations, no justification for these opinions. Just straight to the nitty-gritty of things that need to be said in this houseplant community. Yes, some houseplants are ugly. And it's not even so much that they are ugly, to be honest. It's just that they're just really... They're not interesting. They are not interesting. They are not like, you don't see them and you're like, oh wow. And as somebody who makes content, houseplant content, and as somebody who also sells plants for a living, I have actually come to experience this, and I know this too well. There are certain plants that are just a hard sell. Like, try as much as possible to convince people that, oh, this plant is good for you, it's gonna look beautiful when you style it in a particular pot. Yeah, they're just not buying it. These plants just don't look interesting enough. And I have one example keeps coming to mind, and you can also share your examples in the comment section below. Cast iron plant. Babes, it's an indestructible plant, hence the name, but it does look uninteresting. Like, even grass looks more interesting than a plant like a cast iron plant. So it's not that these plants are ugly, it's just that they are uninteresting, and like, you might call yourself a plant lover, but you just hardly ever gravitate towards such plants. Okay. Okay, buckle up, babes. We just got started. This next one, babes, we need to be very honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves and tell ourselves these things. Neem oil isn't very effective. I know neem oil is the standard go-to for pest treatment, but to be honest, is it that the pests of these days have become resistant to neem oil, or like neem oil has just never worked? I honestly cannot remember, realistically speaking, and babes, I think that might be the same for you. Let me know in the comments. But realistically speaking, I cannot remember the last time I eradicated a pest infestation with just neem oil. I cannot remember. I certainly cannot. And if you're a plant parent and you're relying entirely on neem oil, honey, the pests are going to win the battle. The pests are going to win the battle. So I don't know what it is. It just appears to me that neem oil has never really been as effective as it is professed to be. And I don't know why it is the standard for pest treatment. Yes, it is organic, but I feel like there are more effective organic, pest treatment measures, like the diatomaceous earth, even using live bulbs. Neem oil, maybe because neem oil is the most accessible and probably the most affordable. But please, I will strongly advise, especially if you have a large collection, do not rely entirely on neem oil. It is not effective, and I suspect it even requires multiple applications for it to actually be considerably effective to a certain extent. But to be honest, it's not something that I will advise anyone to rely solely on in terms of pest treatment. Okay, yeah, now this is something I want us to be honest with ourselves with. To be honest, babes, a lot of plant swaps aren't fair. There's always somebody that ends up giving more, and there's always somebody that ends up receiving less than what they gave or expected. I know the idea of plant swaps are actually really cute and everything, and it's an amazing way to actually get plants, a budget-friendly way to actually get plants. But it's not always fair. I've had a couple of them here, and I'm always the type of person that likes to just really, like, if I'm giving somebody plants, I like to go like the extra mile, make the packaging amazing. I'm certainly not going to give you like a small cotton. I'll make sure the cotton is big. I just like to go the extra mile. That's how I am. But I've come to realize that there are a few of us like that when it comes to plant swaps. When it comes to plant swaps, some of the girlies, a lot of the girlies will end up giving you that very tiny cotton, that very tiny looking plant. something that doesn't even have that many roots. It just feels like they give you like the rejects, like, oh, take. So yeah, I feel like with plant swaps, whoever is organizing them needs to have like very rigid rules, not necessarily rigid rules, but like certain prerequisites, oh my goodness, but like certain requirements. English language is not my first language, but like certain requirements, like certain requirements that have to be met. Like maybe quality assurance requirements to ensure that people are getting something reasonable. Because the few plant swaps I've attended, and maybe I haven't attended a lot, I just end up always feeling disappointed. Like I ended up giving up too much than what I was expecting. Let me know in the comments if this is also your experience, or maybe this is just me, but let me know in the comments if you also feel this way and if this is also your experience. Alright, this next one, and I've said it a couple of times in this channel and I'm going to keep reiterating it. Rescuing plants isn't always a good idea. Babes, I know that clearance section in your Lowe's or your Home Depot, it's offering really amazing discounted plants. I know all of this, but please don't buy those plants. Please. Rescuing plants can actually end up being disastrous for your collection, and I'm speaking on experience. I once had a very nasty trip infestation that literally took an entire year to put under control. I am still battling it from time to time, and it was because I bought a plant in a clearance section. This plant was heavily infested. I didn't know it was infested with thrips back then, but it just looked like it was busted and crusted, but it was heavily discounted, and I got it. And babes, it wasn't worth it. I ended up spending so much more and losing a lot more plants from trying to contain the thrips that plant brought into my home. Okay, and that is the thing with plants that I see people rescuing plants from the bin. I see people rescuing plants from the clearance section. Well, you don't have to do it. Sometimes just let it go. You don't have to keep rescuing plants or people for that matter. Sometimes they may end up hurting you. I know we're having an Oprah moment right now, but just let that plant go. Okay, and this also applies to your collection as well. It's not every plant that needs to be rescued. Sometimes compost bin, we've talked about this before. I don't have to keep reminding you. Sometimes compost bin, sometimes just let go of that plant. You don't have to be the hero. When Mariah Carey wrote that hero song, she didn't write it about you. You don't always have to be the hero in every situation. Okay, let's be guided, ladies. Let's do better in 2025. Okay? Now, I know this one is our favorite propagation method. It's like the go-to propagation method for a lot of us because it's really easy and also quite effective, to be honest. But babes, it has to be said that water propagation isn't always the best option. Water propagation isn't always the best option because at the end of the day, yes, you do have somewhat of a higher success rate, but those roots are going to end up being water roots, and water roots are very fragile. They're like finicky, tiny, they're soft, they've been pampered so much, they haven't met resistance from soil and grit, so it might take a harder time transitioning that plant to soil. And even when that plant transitions, I also feel that it also takes a harder time for the plant to just grow more beautifully in soil, as opposed to a plant that was propagated straight from soil from the get-go. Do you get what I mean? So it's something I'm trying to gradually wean myself off and just embrace propagating directly in soil. You may not have the highest success rate as you would in water, but I feel, and in my experience actually, I've noticed that you're going to end up having a more solid and vigorous growing plant. A plant that just loves soil, because it was literally birthed in soil. It loves soil and will just take onto soil and whatever soil substrate you give it better and more readily than one that was, rooting in water. So let's try to wean ourselves. Let's try to develop more of a habit of propagating things in like soil rather than like water. Speaking of propagation, I've said this before, but I'm gonna repeat myself again for some of you stubborn girlies that haven't learned. Propagation isn't always worth it. You don't have to propagate that plant. That plant is declining. You don't have to take cuttings to try to propagate it and start it all over again. I'm begging you, if you can afford it, just go and buy another plant. I don't think we realize that sometimes it takes years for a plant that you grew from a cutting to become the once full and lush plant you once had. It takes years. So babes, I want you to ask yourself, is this a plant that I can always easily get? Is this a plant that I can very affordably get again? If it is, just get another one. You don't have to start, let me propagate. It's similar to the rescuing situation that we talked about. You don't have to always do that. If you can easily get that plant again, go and get it again, my love. You don't have to be propagating. Like, oh my God. Also, we've talked about this. This is how some of you run into burnout. And the next moment I hear, I'm sick and tired of houseplants, because you're propagating every and everything. You have every single, there's nothing you're not propagating. Madam, take it easy, please. And take it easy on propagation. If it's a plant that you can easily buy again, just go to your big box store and buy it again. Please, go and buy it from the big box store. And drop that cutting in the compost bin. Oh my God. This next one is cheap grow lights can actually be just as effective as expensive grow lights. One thing I want you to realize when it comes to this houseplant hobby is please always cut your coat according to your size, right? Because the hobby can get very expensive. Okay, so don't ever feel pressured, but like, oh my God, everyone is using this cool looking grow light, oh my God, and it costs like hundreds of dollars. Fine, just go for the cheaper ones. After I talked about one I recently got from Temu, and it's because of that I actually decided to include this point. For some strange reason, I just felt that because it was cheap, it wasn't going to work. But I've actually noticed some differences. In my plants underneath the grow light. Maybe the more expensive grow lights are more aesthetically pleasing. They feature decor better, fine. But if you can't afford them, don't let anyone pressure you. But I'm guilty of this. Forgive me, please. I remember I made this video and I was telling you guys that, oh my God, these cheap looking grow lights are terrible. Get yourself the Sotek grow lights. I was speaking from a bit of ignorance, honestly, because I didn't realize how expensive these grow lights I was recommending were versus how really cheap these grow lights I was bashing actually are. So please, don't let people like me pressure you, okay?
Oh my God, what is that?
What the? As I was saying, don't let people like me pressure you, darlings. Just do what your pockets can afford. And like I've pointed out, these cheap grow lights may not look the best, but they actually get the work done. Okay. This next one. Just because a plant is root bound doesn't mean you have to report it. You don't have to always report every root bound plant. I know like the general rule of thumb is once you see that plant is root bound, report it. That may actually not be a good idea. I live in a country where we have a very long growing season. And one thing I've come to realize is that my plants here get root bound very easily and they can grow very, very aggressively as a result. I live in a rented and shared space, so I obviously don't want these plants to just take over and just become wild and very intimidating. So for some, I actually leave them root bound. Yeah, I have a Cebu blue pothos that has been root bound for years. Well, not years, but like for a couple of months now. And that's fine. So darlings, if a plant is root bound, now the exception, because there is an exception, we have to take into consideration the overall health and well-being of that plant. If some plants don't like to be root bound, they will just start shedding leaves, they'll start acting up, being dramatic. If that is the case with such plants, you can give them a bigger pot, or what I like to do is even chop the roots and stick them back in the same pot. Okay, but if it's a plant that is fine just being root bound, obviously it's not going to grow as fast or even at all, then leave her be. Leave her be. So just because a plant is root bound doesn't mean you need to report it, my love. Okay, I say this because when I first got into houseplants, I used to just feel, oh my god, my plants are root bound, I have to report. But these days, except I want that plant to actively grow, and I'm gonna give it a bigger pot. But like I said, I live in a shared rented space, so there's even so much in the size of pots I can upgrade to. So just take that into consideration and realize that just because a plant is root bound doesn't mean you need to report it, or rather you have to report it. All right. Okay, this next one, Perlite. We need to be honest. Let's calm down. We just need to be honest with ourselves. Girl to girl. Perlite is overrated and overused. It's kind of like it's overrated and overused. I feel like it's one of those capitalist traps where you've just been conditioned to believe that you need perlite. You need perlite to losing your soil, to prevent the soil from being compact. You just need perlite. And I once subscribed to that notion. I was obsessed with perlite to the point there where we used to import it. I used to import it directly from you guys in the US to use, because we don't produce perlite here in Nigeria. Until the exchange rate became bonkers. And it became really expensive to do so. But it made me realize that I didn't really need it for my soil mix. There are certain other locally available alternatives that I could add that were even a lot more cheaper, like sharp sand or like rice husk, or like cocoa coir chips, that actually did a better job than perlite. Also, another thing about perlite is that it gets really messy, especially if you live in a very rainy climate that I live in. It can just get really messy, and then the perlite is all over the place. But yeah, you don't really, it's very overused. Like, it's not a must. Plus, some of you also even overuse it. Like, your potting mix, you add perlite, you add cocoa coir chips, you add orchid bark, it's too much. It is too much. That soil becomes too porous and too chunky. We've talked about this on this channel before. Not every plant needs a chunky. Not every plant needs a chunky potting mix. Some of you, the reason why your plants are stunted is because that potting mix is too chunky. You've added perlite, you've added this, you've added... Oh, Jesus. Take it easy. Take it easy. There are plants I have growing here, and all I'm using is just cocoa coir. Okay? I'm not saying you should do that too, but yeah, I just feel like perlite is overused, and it's not a do or die affair. It's not a do or die affair, okay? In this houseplant soil amendment thing. Alright, I think we have come to the end of this video. I don't like to make these sort of videos too long. I think we've come to the end of this video, but I'm curious, darlings, what did you think about this? Do you agree with my points? Is there something else that I missed? Do you want me to do like a part 3? Because I've done this video before. This is a part 2 of this. Do you want me to do a part 3 of this? Please, let's kiki in the comment. I'm really fascinated and curious to know what you guys think about these my opinions. But are they even controversial? Let me know in the comments, okay? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, as usual, don't need to be reminded, like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye, loves.